So once again, welcome everyone to today's webcast. I'm Pat Soldano, President of Policy and Taxation Group and Family Enterprise USA. The title of our webcast today is Smart Strategies for Family Business Success, and we are hosting Rockefeller Global Family Office today. Most successful families focus on the numbers, but long-term success requires a holistic approach, one that balances wealth, relationships, and shared purpose. The Rockefeller Global Family Office successfully advises the Rockefeller family and other families like yours to maximize cash flow, minimize estate and income tax, and prepare the next generation for the future success of your business and the maintenance of family unity. We have 4 speakers today, all from Rockefeller Global Family Office. Shirley Quackenbush, who's Managing Director, Private Wealth Advisor. Robert Panetti is also a Managing Director, Private Wealth Advisor. Michael Misciagna is Managing Director, Head of Rockefeller Global Family Office Investment Banking Coverage. And Ryan Coulson is a Senior Wealth Strategist. Welcome to all of you today. We really appreciate you joining this webcast.
Thanks, Pat. On behalf of the Rockefeller Global Family Office, we're so pleased to be a member of Family Enterprise USA and support the work you do on behalf of family businesses. Over the next 40 minutes or so, we're going to share some thoughts across 3 areas: alignment of values, family values, estate planning, and capital formation. 3 really broad topic areas that almost every family business finds to be part of an iterative process and not really an event. And certainly 3 things that can have tension with one another. We believe through our experience of working with many families that these are the things you need to get right. And there's a lot of other things that are important, but if you don't have these right, it really makes it hard relative to family business succession. These topics are also really familiar to the Rockefeller family itself, which has been through several iterations on each topic in many dimensions. A few facts, as many of you know, the Rockefeller Family Office was founded about 145 years ago by John D. Rockefeller to manage the wealth that was created by Standard Oil. The Rockefeller Family Office is now serving approximately 280 family members in their 7th generation. Until 8 years ago, the Rockefeller Family Office worked primarily with the family, but realizing the need to retain and develop talent and achieve scale, the Rockefeller family decided to bring in outside capital and management with a management team led by Greg Fleming to grow the business, to be able to share the depth of capabilities with high net worth families and ultra high net worth families, many of whom are business owners. Today, the Rockefeller Family Office has 49 offices in the United States and 1 in London, and we manage approximately $170 billion today, up from $18 billion 8 years ago. We're going to share some thoughts and insights that we've gathered over time. When I step back and think about this, I think of some of the challenges I've had in finding a doctor. Maybe some of you have had a similar experience. I want a professional who's holistic, multidisciplinary, and integrative. And this has been surprisingly hard to find. But I find that these 3 features are equally important when it comes to navigating family business transitions. It goes without saying there can be tension between the alignment of family values, estate planning, and capital needs. We're going to share a couple of case studies and we'll leave time for questions. Many have come in already. In fact, a common theme in many of the questions has been around next generation. Many of our clients with businesses wrestle with next generation transitions. It's more common that generations see things quite differently as opposed to perfectly aligned. One seemingly small thing that we found is that you can't underestimate the power of story. Everyone who's built a business has a story to tell. Often sharing, challenging or vulnerable parts of the origin story can be strong connective tissue in alignment and values. A story that's particularly impactful to the Rockefeller family is found in the picture that I'm showing right now, that was taken in 1932 as Rockefeller Center was being built. This is an iconic photo showing construction workers on their lunch break at Rockefeller Center, sitting very precariously on a steel beam, yet looking like it's just another day at the office. It's also important to note that Rockefeller Center was built in the midst of the Great Depression and in fact sat largely empty for many years after it was completed. Many of you know the story of John D. Rockefeller and Standard Oil, but in some ways this picture and the challenges around building Rockefeller Center might have a deeper meaning to the generations of the family that followed. This picture is still in all of our offices around the country, and it has meaning on many levels. In the picture, we see gratitude for the unsung heroes of our country, the vision of American spirit to invest during times of uncertainty, humility given that Rockefeller Center was built during the Great Depression, and the project came close to destroying the wealth of the family, believe it or not. And finally, diversification and risk management that served the family through 7 generations now. With this, I'm pleased to introduce my partner, Shirley Quackenbush, to share some thoughts on family values and alignment.
Thank you, Robert. I'm very happy to spend a few minutes on how our team helps clients align family values for long-term success. So as Robert mentioned, the Rockefeller family became a part of American history not only because of their fortune, but how they successfully transitioned that fortune from one generation to the next and made a profound impact on the world for 7 generations. But the longevity of their wealth didn't happen only because of skillful financial planning and brilliant wealth transfer strategies. It's really because of their intentional empowerment of each rising generation through financial education and shared family values. So that's tough. I mean, how do we develop shared values? How do we engage the next generation? How do we maintain family unity? These are all challenges that every family we work with faces. Let's talk about, the challenges. When your name is Rockefeller, you have arts and education and medical institutions that are founded by your family. So it's probably a little easier for the Rockefeller family to feel a very strong shared family mission. But for the families we serve that are under the radar, cultivating that shared mission is really challenging. Every family comes with unique dynamics, histories, traditions, and that really complicates the process of aligning values. Different generations, as we all know, right? We have varying perspectives on what's important, and that's based on when you grew up, personal experiences, challenges that you faced. So if approached the right way, that diversity of thought can really be a source of strength for families. But that's the magic formula, right? And that's the secret sauce that's so difficult to achieve because it's all about being able to maintain family unity, better understand and appreciate each other. And we know human beings are complex. If this was really easy, we wouldn't be having today's conversation. So I'm going to share just four actually, key recommendations with you. Our first recommendation is you need to ask important and really difficult questions of each other. The next generation needs to feel heard and trusted. You can do all the cutting edge estate planning, financial education, hire the best investment managers, but if you don't get that alignment of values piece nailed, it just doesn't work. So we find that a foundation of trust supports and governs the next gen to make good decisions going forward. And as the first gen, you need to trust that. Ultimately, this emphasis on trust and respect for each other transforms this financial planning process into a unifying force, and it empowers every family member to contribute meaningfully, whether they're working in the business or not. So we use various tools to develop that shared sense of purpose, and again, it's about collective achievement. Second, we all need a common family theme. And as parents and as wealth builders, I think you can relate as I can. We seek to protect our children, protect our business, protect our wealth. And generally, the younger generation rebels. They seek to be appreciated for their own capabilities. And finding a balance between these two themes is really hard. It's also incredibly rewarding. And for parents, it's essential to communicate why we feel the need to control and the reasons behind important financial decisions. And that's part of opening the kimono. It doesn't have to open exceptionally wide initially in these conversations, but there needs to be some rationale for why things have been done the way they have. And that's really the most challenging. How do we transition from a parent that's protecting to a collaborator? I'm reminded of a couple of clients. One is really stuck in this area. His son works alongside him, and he's a bit frozen next to his father. Dad is so accomplished, and he's so confident in his abilities, and he's so highly respected in his industry that he's unintentionally stifling his son's progress. Contrast that with another client, a family enterprise that is run very effectively by the second generation, who's grown the business in ways that were certainly never imagined by the first. And the reason why is because the first generation was also a highly accomplished lawyer who turned the business over to his son 20 years ago, took the risk of walking away from the business he founded, and went back to practicing law. And that family is a healthy family. Everyone feels valued and is calm. Third point, financial education. Financial education empowers everyone. It's got to be strong and consistent, ongoing. It's essential. Everyone in the family, not only those that are involved in the family enterprise, but everyone needs to have confidence in their ability to make wise financial decisions and understand the why behind the advice they're being given. That education should be ongoing. We developed our education program for the Rockefeller family initially. It's morphed quite a bit into something even broader, and it's quite disciplined. All leaders of the firm contribute to the curriculum and contribute to teaching, and we take this so seriously. We have an educational event that's almost weekly. Finally, family legacy is key. Oftentimes this word is really intimidating. It doesn't mean that your family needs to take on a huge cause and create a large nonprofit organization. It simply refers to what's that glue that's going to keep your family together. True wealth, as we know, it isn't just about the financial success. It includes those principles and ideals that are going to keep the family unified. And so we've utilized some tools we've created called a wealth and values exercise that helps lead these values-driven conversations. So I know this is short. I hope, though, that this has opened the kimono and opened our dialogue just a bit about what we think is important. Now let's shift gears to financial planning.
Thanks, Shirley. So, Lauren, let's go ahead and put up a poll that'll speak to what Ryan will be speaking about. And next, it's a pleasure to introduce Ryan Coulson, who is a senior wealth strategist for the Rockefeller Global Family Office. She's going to share a case study of a client she recently helped, and the challenge was really to manage the tension between tax minimization and cash flow and liquidity. I'm reminded of a phrase that if you carry around a hammer all day, everything looks like a nail. We have many clients who express really strong goals in terms of paying as little estate tax as possible. And we find estate planning attorneys are really good at executing on this. And we've seen estate plans where they do execute on the tax minimization goal, but often leave very little flexibility for cash flow and liquidity for the grantor or the founder. And so, Ryan, I'd love to hear how you approach this.
Sure. Thanks, Robert. So in our wealth strategy group, most of us are either recovering attorneys or recovering CPAs, and we serve to bridge the gap between the concepts or the types of trust and the types of wealth transfer that you would use and how it works practically for the family. So in that vein, we thought we'd share a recent case study and walk you through how we analyze wealth transfer for the clients. And it highlights why you need to collaborate with not just your legal and tax advisors, but with the investment advisors as well, to consider the total financial picture when you are developing a transfer plan. So as many of you may know, under the One Big Beautiful Bill, not only is the estate exemption remaining high, it's actually increased to a $15 million exemption. So what does this mean? Next year, each individual can leave $15 million estate tax free. Anything above and beyond that is taxed at a 40% rate. So this kind of highlights now, no one's rushing towards the end of the year where we thought it was going to sunset. We thought it was going to get cut in half. That's sort of alleviating that rush to do a lot of lifetime gifts, but it is highlighting the need to do the math, as it were, and figure out, are we doing lifetime gifts or are we waiting until we pass? What makes the most sense in light of that cash flow? And that's why we do need to analyze. So I want to introduce you to the Smith family. This is Mom and Dad Smith. We met them about a year and a half ago. They came to us with their estate. Dad Smith has run the Smith Family Corporation for a number of decades. He has 3 successful retail type stores. He conveniently has 3 children. So he thought he'd develop a store for each child, and that would be what his legacy would be. Turns out the children have passions of their own and they have businesses of their own that they want to pursue. He's made a few lifetime gifts that totals to about 1.8 million in lifetime gifts to help them get started on their ventures of their own. So that's what you see here on their balance sheet. The Smith Corporation with those 3 retail shops has the majority of the wealth. And then he has partial interest in some of these other entities. And he has some small sort of liquid assets, so cash and securities, but the bulk of the assets are in the Smith Family Corporation. So he's got an estate worth about $64 million. So they came to us and said, what can we do? What kind of estate planning can we do? So if we do the estate analysis and we run it through, and we said, okay, what happens if both of you pass away? As I said, they have made some lifetime gifts. So their estate exemption right now is currently about $26 million of exemption. This year, there's that $13.9 million exemption. If they both passed away, it's about $14 million of estate taxes that would be owed. Again, he's made some previous lifetime gifts. Those are the assets that you see that are outside of the estate. So they said, what do we solve for this? Now, we had spoken with their attorney and they said, looks like they've got 26 million of exemption. What does that look like? Should we gift? Let's go ahead and run the cash flow. Let's see what makes sense for them. So we said, okay, base case. What are we looking at? What are the types of trust that clients use? So I know that you've had a lot of webinars with probably estate attorneys have talked about what are the types of trust that we use. The most common trust that most clients use when making gifts to the next generation are what we call intentionally defective grantor trusts. They're not defective because they don't work. They're defective for income tax purposes. And why do we set them up this way? What makes sense? Why is it this kind of trust that we use? Well, the IRS says anything you own or control as of the date of your passing is subject to estate taxes. So in order to do advanced tax planning, we need to give something away so that we don't own it and we don't control it. So we put it into an irrevocable trust. The trust is irrevocable. The trust now owns the assets. Because it's irrevocable, I can't change it. I don't control it either. Therefore, I don't own it. I don't control it. Not subject to taxes when I pass away. But an intentionally defective grantor trust, I do own it in the eyes of the IRS for income tax purposes, not for estate tax, but for income tax purposes. Why would I do this? Well, a few different reasons. The main reason is when I put the assets into the IDGIT, which is kind of what we call it for short, those assets compound and grow over a period of time, but I'm still on the hook for the income taxes. So now these assets don't have to pay their own income tax bill, which actually means they get to grow a little faster because I'm using now my in-estate or other assets to pay the income taxes. Kind of feels like an extra gift to the kids, but the IRS doesn't call it that. So that means these assets get to grow a little bit longer, sort of a benefit. The other thing is I can now transact with the trust. If I want to sell assets to the trust, get more assets in there in exchange for a note, which is sort of what you see here in this diagram. If I sold assets to anybody else on the street, especially if I have low basis in those assets, I would have to recognize a capital gain. But because I'm selling something to myself, because I'm the income tax owner of this trust, I don't recognize any capital gains taxes. So I can transact with this trust, no capital gains. That's a huge benefit to me. So that's the other reason why I want to be the income tax owner. And finally, inside these trusts, there's something called a swap or a substitution power. So if I transfer an asset into the IDGIT today, because that's the asset that makes the most sense, I'm going to transfer Smith Family Corporation, a low basis basket of securities, whatever asset makes the most sense today. Let's call it it's $10 million worth of whatever. 10 years down the line, I say, you know what? I kind of want that asset back. I've now got some liquidity. I sold a different business. I won the lottery. Name your liquidity event. I would rather swap in cash. So now it's worth 20 million. I'm going to take my 20 million in cash, put that in there, take my 20 million of assets back. I can swap. So there's a lot of, I kind of call them superpowers that are inside these idiots that make a lot of sense. So that's why most attorneys will draft these long-term trusts for clients that are these intentionally defective grantor trusts to begin with, because you've got a lot of flexibility down the line. So that's sort of the base case, what we said for the Smith family. Let's look at a grantor trust as a vehicle to potentially use your exemption. But first, let's see what happens if you do nothing. Base case, do nothing. What does your cash flow look like? So the majority of their cash flow is coming from distributions from the corporation. So $2 million is coming from the distributions from the corporation. They've got small withdrawals coming from their family holding company, very small amount coming from Social Security. They're both 85 years old, by the way. And then investment yield on a $2 million. And they're actually very frugal. They don't spend too much per year. The majority of their expenses go out in taxes, which is coming from the distributions that are coming from the corporation. So when we do a cash flow, what does that look like year over year? That's where you see here. Their inflows, again, what's coming from the LLC, a little bit of Social Security, their investment income. So that's the yield on a very conservative investment, because again, they're 85. Other inflows, that's the majority of what's coming in here is the Smith Family Corporation. So total inflows, they've got a nice inflow. Most of their expenses, again, that's income taxes plus their living expenses. So their net cash flow is positive. They're adding to their portfolio year over year. So base case, do nothing. Their assets are growing over a period of time. The program has them living about until 95, which is their sort of life expectancy based on standard living. So if we look at estate transfer, what is their estate going to look like in 10 years? How much are they going to be able to leave to their family as all of their assets grow? So what does the estate transfer look like? So now you see if they both pass when they're 95, their net estate is 105 million. They've got about 35 million that they owe in taxes. So about 107 million in assets go to the family. If you do nothing, if you don't gift today and just keep your exemption when you pass 107 million, you've got to pay 35 million in taxes. So how do we solve for this? Then we're going to look at, okay, and this is what their attorney said. Let's make a gift. You've got 64 million in assets. Let's go ahead and gift, your full 26 million of exemption that you have left. That probably makes a lot of sense. I will point out that we gifted a portion of the corporation and we were able to get a discount. So I saw there were a few questions on discounting in family entities. When you have a private entity and you gift a minority interest, you get discounts in the eyes of the IRS for lack of marketability and lack of control. If I'm giving a part of a privately held interest or selling a part of a privately held interest to somebody else, and I'm saying, hey, I've got this interest in this company and I'm going to, by the way, you don't have a lot of control over it. There's no readily available market for it. Are you going to pay that percentage of underlying assets? Or are you going to say, actually, I'm going to give you about 30% less than that? That's what the IRS will do for a valuation discount as well. So rather than $38 million worth of the corporation, you get a discount down to 26 million, which is conveniently about how much exemption they have left in their gift. So we've gifted now 38 million worth of the corporation into this idjit for the benefit of the kids. Got a nice little discount. We call that a squeeze it down, and then we're going to freeze it at today's values, put it in the idjit for the kids. How does that affect their cash flow? So let's go through it again. Now their distributions from the corporation have been reduced because they've given the corporation away. The corporation now lies inside the idjit, but the rest of their inflows all remain the same. So everything is all remaining steady. Their expenses, again, they're still paying all of the income taxes because they are the income tax owner on the idjit. So their expenses all remain the same. They've just lost some of their cash flow because the value of the corporation has gone into the idjit. The idjit is going to compound and grow for the benefit of the kids. So how does this look on a year-to-year basis? So you see their income inflows, their investment income, the other inflows. So the other inflows are the distributions from the corporation have gone down. Their net cash flow looks quite abysmal now. You can see after year 2, they don't have any cash flow left. So if we had done what the attorney had advised was, you've got 64 million, go ahead and give away your full exemption, their cash flow negative, they're cash poor. They could not afford to make this gift. And if we had not run the numbers, we would have not known that. Now, yes, the estate transfer looks better because you can see the IDGIT, the children's assets, these grow significantly. There was 107 million was going to the kids at the end of the day versus now 131. But what were we doing for with they would have had to get loans. I don't know how they would have made it for the cash. It wouldn't have made sense for them. They have no investment income. They spent down all of their portfolio assets and they basically have nowhere else to pull from. They would have had, we don't know what they would have done. But if you hadn't run the money, you wouldn't have known that. So then we said, okay, that doesn't work. Scrap that. What do we do? Now, this is where the gift and the sale made sense. So we said, let's go ahead and gift. We're also going to sell the remaining portion of the company in exchange for a note. The note is going to pay back husband and wife. That's going to retain some cash flow for them. Behind the scenes, we worked out the numbers. Was it interest only, interest and principal? We ran a couple of different scenarios to make sure that the cash flow made sense. In this sense, it was a little bit of interest and principal, but you have to figure out what it makes sense for the right client. So, and again, you got a discount on what you give to the IDGIT. We actually got a discount on the note as well. So we sold 20 million worth of the company in exchange for the note, but the note was only for 14 million. So because we've squeezed down this value, we've actually got a lot more into the IDGIT for the benefit of the kids. So what does the cash flow look like again? Now you've got $950,000 on the note that's coming back to the client. So now we've preserved some cash flow. Again, all other things are equal. The outflows are still the same because they're the income taxpayers on the IDGIT. All of the other inflows remain the same. The only thing that's different is they're getting payments on the note. So what is the inflow? What do the cash flow looks like now? We're looking at now they've got income inflows, investment incomes, other inflows is now the payment on the note, total inflows. You can see their net cash flow is still, it's a little bit negative, but it's sustaining itself and it's actually working out kind of perfectly to where in the end of the year, their portfolio assets kind of even out almost perfectly. And what you're not seeing behind the scenes is we could prepay that note a little bit more if they were running out of assets, is you can actually prepay that 14 million even more. So what does the estate transfer look like? Now we only have 8 million in taxes and expenses, when recall in the base case it was 35 million, and 134 million go to the kids versus 107, 131, 134. So we've gotten more to the kids, less in taxes, and mom and dad are taken care of as far as cash flow goes. So when we compare all of those scenarios, I've just summarized them verbally for you. You can see that we had to do the math. You have to run it and make sure what makes sense. So when we presented this, the attorney was in the room. He said, wow, we would have made the clients poor. And this is what happens when you do this in a vacuum, is you have to work with the client. You have to figure out what is the cash flow, what makes the most sense. And the proof really is in the pudding, is it's got to make sense for everyone involved. And that's why it's important to coordinate all of your advisors. So hopefully this makes sense. I know it was quick, but it's really, the math has to math at the end of the day.
Ryan, that was great. Thank you. You went through a lot of really detailed stuff very quickly. And but the bottom line point is, it's holistic and multidisciplinary and integrative, right? You got to look at the whole picture. And I think you drove that home well. Lauren, let's go ahead and add some of the poll questions for Mike's section. While you're doing that, I'm going to switch gears and this leads to thinking about the continuum of the estate plan and transition of the business to the next generation. And we see a lot of different dynamics. Perhaps clients have done a great job balancing the tension between estate planning and cash flow needs, but the next generation wants to expand the business and needs cash flow, or it needs growth capital. On the other hand, the other end of the spectrum, perhaps the next generation really isn't interested in being engaged, and there's a need for maybe a strategic partner or a capital partner to help with the future direction of the business. So I'm going to turn to Mike Misciagna, who's head of Rockefeller's investment banking coverage, for some insights on this and some case studies. And Mike, tell us, a little bit about the investment banking group. Just give us a 2-minute quick overview, and then we'll jump into the case studies.
Great. First off, I appreciate everyone's time today, and I'm really happy to be here with you, Robert, as well as Shirley and Ryan, and grateful for Family Enterprise USA for having us today. When you think about the investment banking team at Rockefeller, I think it's important to understand the origin story of our team. We were created to fulfill a promise to our Rockefeller Global Family Office clients and prospects to serve entrepreneurs, family-owned business clients, business operators, and help provide them advice on what may be someone's largest asset, their business. While a lot of firms have really strong wealth management or family office practices on one hand, and a strong investment banking group on the other that exist as standalone businesses, at Rockefeller, we really aim to bring those two services together to provide best-in-class holistic advice. As we heard from Ryan, the structure of business ownership is a crucial component to any financial or wealth strategy plan. We think, of course, that providing business advice to business owners is also a crucial component of any family's wealth plan. So by definition, the services of an investment bank tend to be transactional in nature, but our goal at Rockefeller and our approach is to really turn this transactional business into a long-term relationship business. We are often speaking with business owner clients well in advance of any sort of transaction, and a lot of our discussions are with business owners that may never look to sell their company, yet can benefit from our bankers' expertise in a given industry.
Mike, give us an example of how you and your team work with family business owners. And let's say a business owner who wants to maintain ownership and control of the business, but bring in outside capital for growth or transition to the next generation.
Yeah, so more than anything, we are in the advice business. And Robert, I think so often the advice may be, oh, sell your company, it'll solve all of your issues. But fundamentally, you asked a question that revolved around not wanting to do that. So I think step one is really listening to clients and providing good, unconflicted advice. And we think as long as we're giving that unconflicted advice, we'll always have a valuable service to provide, and we'll grow with our clients as they think through next steps for their business. We are frequently asked about clients that are looking to fund growth initiatives or a family transition plan without having to sell the business. And typically these clients want to avoid dilution in these situations. So Robert, while all situations are unique in this hypothetical example, if a business does have access to and an ability to grow via a pre-existing lending relationship with a traditional bank, that's likely to be a great option. That's likely to be a lower cost of capital to clients. But oftentimes that's not the case. Oftentimes companies outgrow that avenue of financing. Recently, there's been a proliferation of other sources of capital beyond bank financing, namely private credit, direct lenders. Again, while no two situations are the same, a largely accurate rule of thumb is that a private credit provider may offer more flexibility to borrowers, but the trade-off will usually be the cost. With that as a backdrop, and actually, Robert, to more specifically answer your question, yes, let's turn to this slide. Thank you. This slide is a slide that we actually presented to a business owner client. And we understand that there is so much more that goes into a decision than the value of a company. There's different goals and competing motivations for any family-owned business. So this slide, Considerations for Family-Owned Businesses, attempts to lay out the various priorities an owner-operator of a family business may face, as this person typically wears several different hats. They may be executive management and founder and owner of business. And our job at Rockefeller is really to make sure that we're providing advice that touches on each consideration for these different hats that an owner may wear. What do I mean by that? Executive management, they may mostly be focused on wanting to continue managing the business. Founders may care most about the succession plan and the legacy and culture of their business being maintained for the long term. Owners ultimately care about maintaining optionality and ability to realize value one way or another from their company at some point in the future. So first, we start out by understanding what the true goals and priorities are, and then we tailor a capital raise process to help best accomplish the goals of a client. Now, if we go to the next slide, yes, I see it here. I'll preface, this page has a lot of information on it, but this is an example of an actual page we showed to a family office client once we better understood their goals. Again, this client was not looking to sell the business, but wanted advice as to how to find additional capital to grow the company while maintaining control and maintaining autonomy. In this instance, we did guide the client towards these two middle columns, the first one being fund growth through debt, the second one being sell a minority stake. But as always, we want to lay out the full spectrum of options, and there's obviously nuances between these four options, but this page does include a do nothing option, which we feel proud about because that is always an option, and that's a powerful option of maintaining the status quo. The business runs well today, so why complicate things when you don't need to? And then to the far extreme, we did have to point out that there is an option to sell the company. In this instance, we think it would be a highly valuable and highly sought after asset. So this is an active and real-time dialogue. And I think if we just touch on a few of the key points on this page, focused on the two middle columns here, funding growth through debt, there's some key advantages to that. Of course, you're maintaining your ownership stake in the business. There's not a dilution component there. And if you have an ability to fund future growth, fund a transition plan, maybe have a distribution out of the company to help fund that transition to the next generation, and you can do it with non-dilutive capital, as long as the company can support that debt payment, that interest payment, then we think that is sometimes a good option. We understand a lot of family-owned businesses are debt adverse, they're conservative in nature. But again, we have to work with clients to better educate and show them what leverage their company can support. And then whether that's a leverage level that they're comfortable with, regardless of whether we think it can be supported. Sometimes the better option or another option is to find an equity investor to come in. The positives of this one are it does allow you to come in and partner with someone that hopefully brings more to the table than just capital. Maybe there's strategic rationale. Maybe there's case studies of them helping other family-owned businesses get from point A to point B. And ultimately, you're able to do that while maintaining control. I wish there were more providers of minority equity capital out there. It is typically a little bit more difficult to come across. Oftentimes, there is a trade-off between the valuation you can get for that investment, because this is a third-party investor that comes in with capital with limited rights. They'll have some minority protections along the way, but still you are owning the business, the family's owning the business, and really this is a minority shareholder. So there are trade-offs there as well. Again, there may be different nuances. A combination of options B and C might be the right answer. So our goal is really always to best understand what is the client looking for? Can we help them get there? And if not, can we at least give them the right advice and educate them as to things to consider along the way?
Before we pivot, Mike, to some Q&A, do you want to share just a couple examples that might be real world of how you engaged on some of these?
Sure, and I'll try to keep these brief, and if it makes sense to touch on them in more detail in Q&A, please let me know. Just last week, we were working with an entrepreneur in a tech hardware AI business looking to raise growth capital to help get the business to the next level. So while not a perfect example of what we're discussing here, a lot of the same characteristics. And that was a $21 million Series B capital raise that we successfully advised on. So we're proud of that. More relevant and something that I think is really interesting. A couple of years ago, we had a client based in the southeastern United States, owned an automotive junkyard, for lack of a better term. They sell used automotive parts. And we were approached because they knew one day down the line, they would want to sell that company. So our bankers went down there in a consultative manner and just talked through what a sale would look like. Lo and behold, a couple months later, that party was approached by a competitor in the space that was looking to sell themselves. And our client said, wow, I should probably look at this situation. So our banker went down, again, evaluated the opportunity. And as part of that, we were actually able to help source debt financing to accomplish that acquisition. So the ultimate goal in that situation has not changed for the client. They will at some point in the future want to monetize that business, but now what they'll be monetizing is significantly larger than it was when we began the conversation. And notably, this is not always the case, but notably in that situation, the vast majority of the acquisition was debt financed. So it was no additional equity out of the owner's pocket. And it was something that the business on an ongoing basis was able to support. So we're really proud about that one. Maybe one quick one. There was a restaurant business we worked with, close to 150 locations around the country. And this had a complicated ownership structure, majority owned by the founder. And in this instance, we helped with a recapitalization, meaning we found outside capital. It was debt in this instance as well, through a non-bank financing source. So one of these private credit providers out there to help restructure the ownership of the business, buy out certain minority investors in the business, and allowing our client, the business owner, to realize some liquidity, but maintain ownership of the company for the long term. And then last, only because I think it's a fun one, we had a client that owned a stake in an NFL team, a professional football team. And this was not the core business of the family, of course. This was a limited partner in an NFL team. But they decided that it was time to monetize a portion of that stake. They saw what was happening in team valuations across all of sports. We happened to have strong expertise in that industry, and we helped sell a non-controlling minority stake in that team for a significant amount of money that now that client is able to diversify into other things, and while realizing that cash flow profile that candidly the client was not experiencing from the NFL team stake. So what do all four of those have in common? There was a concern, an issue, a problem that needed to be solved, or simply a question that a client had. And then we were able to brainstorm to help get to the right solution. So no, thank you, Robert. Hopefully that's somewhat helpful.
That's great, Mike. And I love the automotive case study. It reminds me of the phrase of, opportunity is aligned with the prepared mind. And, they went through the exercise of looking to sell, but ended up becoming an acquirer because that probably educated them. So great points. In the interest of time, I'd love to open this up to more of a dialogue back and forth. And Pat, why don't I turn it to you with questions?
That's great. Thanks, Robert. I appreciate that. I remind everybody to put your questions in the Q&A in the chat. And I have some questions I'd like to ask you all. But before I do that, I think I would like to recap the poll questions because I know some of the panelists struggled with some of those results. So quickly, the first poll question was around concerns about transitioning to the business of the next generation. And the vast majority of you answered that with lack of preparedness or capacity of the next generation, which I don't think surprises most of us. The second question revolved around estate planning and the concerns for ensuring the next generation, the future of the family business. And the number one answer to that question was, again, family dynamics and fairness, which I don't think surprises many of us on this call. The last two questions are related to Michael's area. And he asked, have you raised external capital for your business? And the vast majority said no, they have not raised capital for their business. And the second part of that question was, what's the biggest challenge you're facing in ensuring adequate growth for the business? And this is what I found true in my career. Many of them answered, balancing profit distribution to family members and reinvestment needs. So I think that's a good backdrop to the questions that we can ask. And again, I'll remind everyone to put your questions in the Q&A in the chat. I'll start with one question. I think this is a question really for Robert and Shirley, and that's around the goals for the next generation. Everyone talks about the next generation today. It's parents' biggest concern. Are they going to be ready for the business? How's this all going to work out? And so we received a lot of questions from the audience surrounding these conflicting values and goals from one generation to the next. So how do you deal with that?
I'll start, and Robert, I'm sure will have comments to add. we encourage ongoing values exercises. And, you know, it's so difficult to stay on track and keep that momentum going. We find the families that are most successful are those that approach this component of their lives with the same level of vigor that they approach with their business. The successful families that have found their unity to be much stronger happens when they're engaged in a formalized educational and family values continuum program with an outside provider. There are plenty of multifamily offices and consultants that do this work in addition to our firm, but I think it's what I've learned in this time that I've spent in the business, particularly at Rockefeller, is that many families view it as a one and done. And we're going to do this exercise and then we're going to move on. And then they don't approach it again for another 3 or 4 years until the family dynamics become even more challenging. So it's keeping everybody engaged and approaching this ongoing process, you know, and we do it. You've got to also hit all the kids in different ways. Some love the idea of having an annual family retreat and the consultant comes in and everybody works together to continuously move the paradigm forward. Others engage in a way that the second and third and fourth generations commune with other second, third, and fourth generations with other families in the next gen educational events that we do. We have found that every family is different, and we need to have exercises that engage different people in different ways. So it's a much bigger and much more time-consuming process than I think most families have been willing to invest, and we encourage them to invest more and more for success.
The only thing
I think that's a really important point that I just want to emphasize what Shirley just said, Robert. It takes time, and really families need to invest that time, but it will be time well spent. Go ahead, Robert.
Yeah, and I think it's well taken, Pat. I think the only other thing I'd add is, you know, this is sometimes like a combination. It's that investment of time, and you're looking for something that starts to unlock insights and you know, the two stories that Shirley mentioned, the father who, you know, is very charismatic, who's maybe stifling the son, and the other story of the attorney who kind of stepped back from the business and let his son run it. We've actually introduced those two fathers to each other and had dinner just to see how a relationship might evolve, and they've become friends, and now they're starting to share their stories. And so, you know, connectivity is really important, and that's what we try to do is where we do see successful patterns, try to make introductions with our clients to one another to get to know each other, and then nature often takes its course.
That's excellent. And so, Leanne, I see you've asked a question in the chat, and I think Robert is responding to that question. I appreciate that. Any others, please put your questions in the chat or the Q&A. But I'm going to ask Shirley and Robert the next question. And Shirley, you talked about the different programs and tools that Rockefeller Global Family Office has. I think that's critically important to helping families through their process of planning. But maybe you could expand on some of those successful tools of programming that you use with the next gen or the rising next gen and keeping them or getting them engaged.
Sure. So we could spend a whole hour just on that. So I will really minimize this. And in fact, I can share with anyone who's interested. We can share it on your website or through the system that we're utilizing today, some specific slides from our financial education group to exemplify this. We have a curriculum that is robust. We think there are 8 essential areas that need to be covered. And those 8 essential areas need, again, to be reinforced over and over again. And that runs anywhere from personal finance to estate planning to investing to, at the high end, an entrepreneurship program. We have truly, it's like a mini MBA program. Those next gen family members that sign up for many of our education programs make a commitment, and we hold them to it. It's a 3-year-long commitment. They come to New York, to Rockefeller Center. It's a lot of fun because they come together, they spend time together, they get to know others. It's kind of like our business, right? We get to know other people within the business and we feel really connected with them. That helps the connection with the family. They then, it's an annual meeting in New York at Rockefeller Center in our offices, and then from there, it's an ongoing webcast kind of educational program where they meet monthly. Again, some families don't make it as serious as they should, in our view, and they've had less success. The Rockefeller faculty, we're, I think, unique in that we have our hosts that create the curriculum and fulfill the curriculum, teach it, range from our head of philanthropy to our chief investment officer to our chief financial officer, folks that can talk about real life examples and real stories. And so this goes on and on. There's so much more I could share about the financial education curriculum, but I think also on the engagement side, the values exercise, years ago, I used to kind of, because I come from the investment world, right? I was like, values exercise, that sounds a little corny. It's so powerful. And I find, I find with my own family, I'm trying hard to utilize these exercises as well, because every family, no matter what your level of wealth, it's difficult connecting with the next generation and aligning what's important to them with what's important to me. And oftentimes it's just because I haven't asked the question. So I think that multidisciplinary content to engage next gen is super important.
Well, so the takeoff from that is the question that I've been asked many, many times in my career, hundreds, if not thousands of times. And this is probably a question for all of you, is when do you start that education? When do you share with the next gen? You know what the question is, how much do we have? What are the assets? But when do you start educating? That's part of the question. But the other part is, when do you just start educating the next generation, whether it's around the business or the assets?
I'll give just a quick start and let my colleagues finish it up. There's no perfect answer. It all depends upon the family. We have content for kids as young as 15, 16 years old. We do find that it needs to be a more grassroots, family-oriented financial education for young children, but we do have content for teenagers, and we have some participants in our program that are 50 years old. So it's again ongoing, but I think that it can start as early as possible. Your thoughts, everyone else on the panel?
Yeah, I mean, I'd add, I always tell clients it's sort of age appropriate transparency. So you don't necessarily have to share the numbers. And frankly, kids these days, they can Google a lot of things. They can kind of figure out how much your house is worth. They sort of know the way that they live. So they're not immune to knowing certain things, but you can start to talk to them about why the structures are in place. And it's, especially with trusts and things like that, it's not that I don't trust you with the assets. I'm giving you asset protection that you can't give yourself. I'm giving you tax planning that you can't give yourself. I'm actually helping you with these structures. And a lot of this is about values, as Shirley said. So it's how the family thinks about money. That's values that you learn when you're very young. And that's how the family thinks about philanthropy. That's how the family spends their money. What they value is what's important. And that sort of comes through with the clients and with the children when they're younger. And then we start to sort of peel back the onion, and then maybe we talk about the business entities and the business structures. I've had plenty of times where we've led family meetings where we might take the numbers away, but we might start to talk about the structures of the trusts, or why the certain entities are the way they are, or explain the laws, and just kind of start to give some visibility. Because we always say, the attorneys and the CPAs are very good about preparing the money for the family, but you have to prepare the family for the money. And you have to communicate that. So the number one cause of all litigation in families or elsewhere is unmet expectations. Set the expectation, set the communication, and then talk through that. So I don't think that there's, a too soon to discuss that. It's just how much transparency you give to it, because you want to motivate the kids to be their own whatever they're going to be. We kind of talk about it as you want to give them a safety net, not a hammock. You want them to be motivated to do whatever they're going to do in life, but it's still letting them understand, letting them be a part of something, making them feel like they're a part of the family business, or able to achieve whatever they want to achieve, and have those cohesive family values together.
That's excellent advice. Excellent advice from all of you. We're just about at the top of the hour, so I really want to thank you all for your presentation today. Great information. We heard that from individuals in the chat. I'll remind everybody again, you are going to get copies of this recording, as well as the slides will be included. So I really want to thank my panelists for being on this, Rockefeller Global Family Office, and your sponsorship of Family Enterprise USA and all the work we do in Washington, D.C. And I want to thank everyone who attended this Zoom webcast today. Thank you all, and everyone have a great day. Take care.